Picture this: 1798, a young, fiercely ambitious general named Napoleon Bonaparte stands on the sun-scorched sands of Egypt. Before him the legendary pyramids of Giza pierce the sky. Before his troops, a formidable army of Mamluk warriors, famed for their unmatched cavalry, is ready for battle. Napoleon, ever the master of motivation, points to the ancient wonders and declares, "Soldiers, from the height of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you." This wasn't just a battle, it was a clash of civilizations, a moment where history itself seemed to hold its breath. This is the story of the Battle of the Pyramids. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most iconic, and frankly, misunderstood battles of the Napoleonic era. Why was Napoleon in Egypt in the first place? And how did his European army, thousands of miles from home, manage to defeat the legendary Mamluk horsemen? Stick around, because the answers are more fascinating than you might think. So, let's set the scene. In the late 18th century, France and Great Britain were locked in a colossal struggle for global dominance. Napoleon, fresh from his stunning victories in Italy, knew a direct invasion of Britain was too risky because of the Royal Navy's power. So, he devised a brilliant, almost crazy, alternative plan: strike at Britain's lifeline to India by conquering Egypt. At the time, Egypt was officially part of the Ottoman Empire, but in reality, it was ruled by a warrior caste known as the Mamluks. These were the descendants of slave soldiers who had seized power centuries earlier. They were renowned for their superb horsemanship and fierce fighting spirit, a force that had dominated the region for generations. In May 1798, a massive French fleet set sail from Toulon, carrying over 40,000 soldiers, sailors, and a surprise addition: 167 of France's top scientists, engineers, and artists. This wasn't just a military invasion, it was a scientific expedition. Napoleon wanted to not only conquer Egypt but also to understand it, to map its lands, study its history, and bring the light of the Enlightenment to the Orient. It was an incredibly audacious plan, a perfect blend of military ambition and intellectual curiosity. After a daring sea voyage where they narrowly avoided the British fleet under Admiral Horatio Nelson, the French landed near Alexandria in early July. The initial march from the coast to Cairo was brutal. The French soldiers, wearing their thick wool uniforms, were completely unprepared for the scorching Egyptian heat. Water was scarce, and they were constantly harassed by Bedouin skirmishers. Morale plummeted. Many soldiers, delirious from thirst and heatstroke, began to question the entire expedition. They needed a decisive victory, and they needed it soon. On July 21, 1798, near the village of Mbaba, just a few miles from the Great Pyramids, they got their chance. The Mamluk army, led by Murad Bey and Ibrahim Bey, had gathered to crush the invaders once and for all. The Mamluks presented a terrifying spectacle. Their army consisted of roughly 6,000 elite Mamluk cavalry, decked out in vibrant silks and armed with fine sabers, lances, and pistols. They were supported by about 15,000 to 20,000 peasant infantry, or fellahin, who were poorly armed and organized. The Mamluk strategy was simple and had worked for centuries: a massive, overwhelming cavalry charge to shatter the enemy's lines. They were supremely confident against these hardened desert warriors. Napoleon had about 25,000 men. Though exhausted, his troops were veterans of the European wars, disciplined and armed with modern muskets and bayonets. Napoleon knew his infantry couldn't withstand a direct Mamluk charge in a standard line formation, so he deployed his army into something far more robust: the divisional square. This wasn't literally a perfect square. It was a massive hollow rectangular formation, several ranks deep on each side. The soldiers faced outwards, presenting a forest of bayonets in every direction. In the center of each square, they placed their cannons and their cavalry, protected from the initial Mamluk assault. Napoleon formed 5 of these colossal human fortresses, positioned in a staggered line, able to provide supporting fire for one another. It was a brilliant tactical solution, turning his infantry into impenetrable islands of firepower amidst a sea of enemy cavalry. As the Mamluks prepared to charge, the French soldiers stood ready, their discipline holding firm against the intimidating sight. The battle began. With thundering hooves and chilling war cries, thousands of Mamluk horsemen surged forward in a magnificent, terrifying wave. They charged with incredible bravery, hurling themselves directly at the French squares. But this wasn't a battle against disorganized levies. It was against the finest army in Europe. The French squares held their ground. On command, they unleashed devastating coordinated volleys of musket and cannon fire. The effect was catastrophic. Horses and riders were torn apart by grapeshot and musket balls. The Mamluks, used to scattering their enemies with the sheer force of their charge, found themselves breaking against an unmovable wall of steel and lead. Again and again, the bravest Mamluk warriors charged, circling the squares, looking for any sign of weakness. Some even rode right up to the lines, slashing at bayonets with their sabers or firing pistols at point-blank range before being shot down. But the French discipline was unbreakable. The squares remained solid. While the Mamluk cavalry was being decimated, Napoleon saw his opportunity. He ordered his generals to advance. The squares began to move. slowly and methodically like giant walking castles, firing controlled volleys as they closed in on the Mamluk camp at Imbaba. The peasant infantry defending the camp, seeing their legendary cavalry defeated, quickly lost heart. Panic set in. The French stormed the camp, and the battle turned into a rout. Thousands of Mamluks and their supporting infantry tried to flee across the Nile River. Many drowned in the chaos, weighed down by their armor and riches. Murad Bey, defeated and humiliated, fled south into Upper Egypt, while Ibrahim Bey fled towards Syria. The battle was over in just a couple of hours. French casualties were astonishingly light, fewer than 300 men killed or wounded. Mamluk losses, on the other hand, were catastrophic, with thousands lost on the battlefield and in the river. Napoleon had won a stunning and total victory. The road to Cairo, the largest city in Egypt, was now wide open. In the aftermath, Napoleon entered Cairo as a conqueror. He tried to present himself as a liberator, freeing the Egyptians from the tyranny of the Mamluks and respecting their local customs and religion. He even issued proclamations praising Islam. However, the Egyptian people remained deeply suspicious of these foreign, non-Muslim invaders. The Battle of the Pyramids secured Egypt for Napoleon on land, but his grand project was about to suffer a crippling blow. Just 10 days after his victory, on August 1st, Admiral Nelson, who had been hunting the French fleet relentlessly, finally found it anchored in Abakia Bay. In the ensuing Battle of the Nile, Nelson utterly annihilated the French navy, sinking or capturing almost all of their ships. This naval disaster was a turning point. Napoleon and his army were now trapped in Egypt. Their lifeline to France was severed. Although Napoleon would continue to campaign in Egypt and even into Syria for another year, his strategic goal of threatening British India was now impossible. The scientific part of the expedition, however, was a resounding success. The scholars he brought with him laid the groundwork for modern Egyptology. Their most famous discovery, of course, was the Rosetta Stone, the key that would eventually unlock the secrets of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. In 1799, seeing the writing on the wall, Napoleon secretly abandoned his army and slipped back to France, where he would soon seize power and become first consul. His army in Egypt, left behind, would eventually surrender to a combined British and Ottoman force in 1801. So, the Battle of the Pyramids stands as a testament to Napoleon's tactical genius and the discipline of his army. It was a classic example of modern European military organization and firepower overcoming a more traditional but incredibly brave warrior force. But it also highlights the limits of military victory. Without naval supremacy and local support, Napoleon's grand Egyptian dream was doomed to fail. It was a spectacular adventure that ended in strategic failure, but it changed the course of history, reawakened European interest in ancient Egypt, and ultimately propelled Napoleon Bonaparte onto the world stage. What do you think? Was Napoleon's Egyptian campaign a brilliant gamble or a foolish distraction? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another piece of history. We'll see you in the next one.